Hello. I'm here today to ask quite a strange question. Well, I think it's strange, which is, can perfume save the planet? Now, I'm assuming that most of you probably have never really thought about perfume from a sustainability point of view. And I think if it wasn't for what I do for a living, which is make perfume, I might not have thought about it either. But in actual fact, the perfume industry is very big. Somehow, in amongst all of those kind of weird adverts that you see, where there's guys with six packs, and I'm a bit jealous of these guys with six packs, by the way, and it's all black and white and the walls fall down and you're like, oh, wow, incredible. Do you think about sustainability? Do you think about the planet? Not really. You're thinking just a little bit about what's going on. It's a bit confusing. But from my point of view, it's what I think about all the time. And I'm very lucky in that that's been my path, my kind of career, if you like. That I started actually making perfume about 20 years ago. Before that even, when I was a tiny little kid, I was born in a cosmetics factory. Now that might sound crazy, but actually our house, our home, when I was a child was a cosmetics factory. And I've always been around smell. I've always been interested in it. And when it came to sort of furthering my education, I really was drawn to perfumery. I liked lots of different aspects of it, some of which were around the ability to storytell and to connect you to something really interesting and exciting. Some of that was around the creative opportunities with perfume. And a big part of it, I like to travel. And I was really interested in actually what goes into a perfume. My approach, I think, is maybe more like a chef, in that chefs, they're really reliant on their ingredients. If you watch any of those Top Chef kind of things, they're always, any program about that, they're always talking about ingredients, quality of ingredients, where they come from, the provenance of what they use. And I applied that to perfumery. There's a bit of a secret to that, in that good quality ingredients make my life a lot easier. They smell good. I have to do less work as a perfumer, and you have a much better quality product. So there's a little bit of laziness, I guess, in me, but also I'm really interested in where these things come from. And over the course of 20 years, I really just started looking at it from a where does it come from point of view? Why is it like that? And asking questions and building my knowledge up as I went. And I've got to the point more recently where I feel like actually perfumery, as a $40 billion industry, might have a role to play in sustainability, and it might be in that ingredient supply chain, where those things come from and who they can support and where they can support with the money that they buy. And so I'm going to take you over the next period of time on a few little journeys, some of the journeys which I've been lucky enough to go on, looking at ingredients, looking at raw materials, and using fragrance as the kind of backbone of that. These are ingredients that I use in my perfumery, and I'm going to take you to, well, you can see the impressive photograph I've been given permission to use back here. I'm going to take you on a journey to the Great Bear Rainforest, first of all. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have ever heard of the Great Bear Rainforest. Anyone heard of it? When you think of a rainforest, I'm assuming we're thinking hot, tropical, steamy kind of jungles. Is that what everybody's thinking? The interesting thing with the Great Bear Rainforest is it's a temperate rainforest, which means that it's not in the tropics. It means it's in the northern hemisphere. It's actually in Canada, British Columbia to be precise, and it's an area of forest that's about the size of Ireland. I think that's about just over 6 million hectares. So I had to just check that before I turned up today. But the size of Ireland, so you can imagine a huge area of forest. In the temperate rainforest, lots of coniferous trees. When I say that, I mean Douglas fir, pine, things like that. Evergreen trees that grow in this beautiful ecosystem. Now, they all smell. They smell really nice, actually, especially if you're a perfumer. And they also happen to be home to this quite incredible creature. The white bear there is actually a commode bear. So a commode bear is a black bear that, as you may have noticed, is not black. It's white. It's incredibly rare, and locally, it's called a spirit bear. There are probably only a few hundred of these bears. They're an anomaly. They are actually black bears with white fur. It doesn't happen very often, and they're just a kind of emblem, if you like, of the health of this ecosystem. It's an absolutely beautiful place. It's protected forest. They had to work very hard to protect it. And when I visited, I was really lucky to visit an indigenous community, a First Nations community called the Nuhawk. And they'd set up a project distilling the trees of the Great Bear Rainforest. Now, that might sound strange at first, to be distilling trees, but actually what they did was they would cut the fronds of these different conifers. So they would go up, prune the branches, take the needles, and they would bring those together, and to distill them, they put them into this big vessel, blast steam through it, and then they collect the essential oil, which is what I then use in my perfumes. That essential oil, it condenses, and they're able to then sell that to support the community. That's very important because the Nuhawk community, they don't have very many economic opportunities. They are, as I said, they're First Nations, and they have had a lot of hardships over the years, especially since they encountered white settlers, basically. They had been there for several thousand years, but in recent times, rates of unemployment were very high, and they're looking for work and ways to support their ecosystem. They had deliberately chosen not to just cut all the trees down and sell all the timber. They wanted to find truly sustainable ways of preserving this habitat that also has spirit bears in it and is just incredible. When we were there, we saw the tracks of great big grizzlies and the leftover salmon. I got there just after grizzly season, so we just missed all of that. But they were fat and healthy and had gone to sleep. And the region itself, they've also banned trophy hunting recently when I'd visited, which is another big step forward, which meant that animals weren't being killed unnecessarily. And all of these pieces kind of slotted together. And for me, I feel like that was a really exciting and innovative way of accessing your forest, your ecosystem without depleting it, just pruning the branches, creating quite a niche product, an interesting one. You might not have heard of Douglas fir essential oil before, or shore pine, or western red cedar. These are all these incredible oils that they produce. So I'm now going to take you down into the South Americas, or actually into the East Amazon here in Brazil. And we're going to talk about a completely different product, a completely different ingredient, which is called tonka. So tonka is actually a bean. I haven't got one with me here. I nearly did that then, but it's a bean that that is incredibly aromatic if you treat it correctly. So it's harvested from these beautiful Amazonian hardwood trees. They grow right up into the canopy of the Amazon. Really lovely trees, and unfortunately, they're also incredibly valuable as hardwood. So they quite often are cut, taken off, and made into kitchen furniture, worktops, all these different things. But my preference would obviously be for them to reach maturity and to then deposit these lovely beans onto the forest floor that indigenous groups, the guy featured here, he's part of the Kayapo community. They are responsible for a demarcated area, probably even bigger than the Great Bear Rainforest. I think it's something like 10 million hectares. So if Ireland is 6 million, you can imagine how much bigger this area of forest is. And there are only 9,000 Kayapo. And they face lots of different pressures. They face deforestation and land conversion, forest fires, and lots of other things beside. And that makes a big difference to their lives. They are dedicated to preserving their ecosystem. And this is something that I really am passionate about in making this point and making sure everybody understands it, is that Indigenous and First Nations people who have always traditionally lived on land and have lived with the land, are probably our best chance of combating climate change and ecological degradation. It's already been scientifically proven that First Nations and Indigenous groups will preserve their habitat better than any other group of humans on the planet. That means that biodiversity is richer, and that they actually, these ecosystems soak up more carbon than any other. With that in mind, when you're thinking about how do we sort ourselves out around climate change, who do we turn to, which leader, which figurehead? Quite often I think, well, I think we might be better off talking to the guys who really know how to do it and understanding how they access their resources and how they bring themselves into balance. And tonka, for me, is one of those ways of doing it. This lovely seed that drops to the ground, they then harvest them, they then dry them out in a process, they kind of part ferment them, and you get this kind of white crystallization on them. You get this, it's called kumaru in local language as well, and they have coumarin crystals on them. And these are really rich, unctuous smelling crystals. And these, they give you this kind of almost like a vanilla note. It's like a warm hay kind of note. When I'm using it in perfume, it feels like a sort of big hug. It feels like somebody sort of reached their arms around you. And for me, that is a symbol of the kind of the spirit, if you like, of where these beans come from. So with the Kaipo have faced many trials and tribulations, and they do continue to protect their land and their livelihood. And I believe that tonka should be one of these kind of piecemeal, bit by bit kind of answers to how do we support communities that are doing the right thing. And I'm going to go on to one of my kind of favorite topics, if you like. I have a picture of orangutan because I absolutely love orangutans. And kind of inextricably linked to great apes. I think it's just something from my past as a, I don't know, I'm big and hairy. I don't know. Yes, my wife is laughing in the audience. I've always been really interested in great apes. And as we know, many of them are under a great deal of pressure, and their habitats are really precious, and they should be looked after. And it's quite a tricky one to get that balance right. How do you grow crops for communities, and how do you get income and provide livelihoods and provide all these different things for humans, and at the same time make sure that you're also looking after places on the planet where really, there's not many places left where orangutans can go. They live in Indonesia and Malaysia, and they are the last ecosystems where you have rhino and elephant and gibbon and tiger and orangutans all together. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. So we really need to cherish these places. And you wouldn't have thought that perfume has anything to do with orangutans, other than me being big and hairy. But one of the ingredients which I really love, it's something called patchouli. Now, there may be older people in the room that might know what patchouli is and recognize the connotations with kind of hippie perfumes and kind of essential oils from that point of view. In actual fact, patchouli is part of the mint family, weirdly enough. It doesn't smell anything like mint, but it grows in a kind of like a bushy herb-like layer. And you get the leaves and you dry them, and then you get this really nice kind of amber smell that comes off them. It's been traded for many hundreds of years, a really incredible ingredient, and something I love using in perfumery. Very, very popular, and it comes in particular from an area of Indonesia in Sumatra called Aceh. So Aceh is a region that has seen lots of upheaval over the last however many decades. When I first ever visited, Aceh had actually just come out of the Boxing Day tsunami. It was about a year after the tsunami had hit. I was very fortunate to go up into Banda Aceh and to see the aftermath, and to also understand the severity of that situation and the emergency response. And you can see that lots of shockwaves have kind of hit that area over many years. So there are farmers that have learnt to live in a very, I guess, what's the right word? I would say they've learnt to live in a way that has been very hand to mouth. They've had to really work with the land, and it means that they are very close to forests that have orangutans in them. And one of the things I was really fortunate to be a part of and to see when I visited last was a project where they were actually working with patchouli farmers to make sure that they were adding fertility back into the soil, composting, doing lots of organic gardening to make sure that the patchouli was grown right. And then they were also looking to see if they could diversify the types of crops that were grown so that the farmers didn't feel the need to go into the forest for any reason. One of the reasons you may go into the forest is to take firewood. It's a perfectly viable reason, especially if you are distilling essential oils. When you distill an essential oil, you need lots of fuel underneath that big kettle-like drum, huge, great big drums that you put all of the stuff inside. And that heat has to come from somewhere, and that fuel is often from the forest. Well, in actual fact, this project had come up with something a little bit more clever. What they'd managed to do is to take a small part of a river and run that through a micro hydroelectro actually, so not a huge, great big dam, but a very small bit of kit that powered the distillation, which meant that it didn't need the fuel from the forest. And they also then worked with the farmers on making sure that they understood the interaction between orangutan habitat and their own farmland. And at the end of that process, it really felt like you had a model there where people could carry on with their livelihoods as they'd always done, hopefully in a more stable way, less hand to mouth, maybe even providing other ingredients, not just patchouli, but looking at diversifying into different crops so you could earn money from different things, and then looking at truly sustainable ways of using the landscape. I really loved the microhydro. It was just a really simple thing that took the river and made a resource out of it without disturbing the wildlife. And at the end of that process, you hope that you have an essential oil that you can use in perfume that does the planet a little bit better. So just to really wrap this up, my journey through perfume, through ingredients, has been one that I've been really privileged to take. I've absolutely loved it. One of the things that I really enjoy is that when I put these ingredients into a fragrance, and I use my creativity to do that, when I use everything that I've learned, all of the privilege of traveling to these places and seeing them firsthand, bringing these ingredients back, mixing them up in my lab, making a bit of a mess that my kids and everybody get a bit annoyed about, and then being able to put those out into the world. What I really like is that then can connect you directly to these places. Not only am I talking about it, but if you put it onto your skin, you physically are connected to those communities who are producing those ingredients and to those places. And I just feel like if we can all do that in our daily lives in some way, if each industry, if each individual can look and really understand their impact and what they're doing with those tiny little pieces that make up this big jigsaw, it may be that perfumery looks a bit niche. It might be that these ingredients you've never heard of before don't really make much of a big difference. But my feeling is that actually this is where we should be starting. This is how we make the difference and make the change that we'd like to see in the world. And like I say, I feel very privileged to have gotten this far with it and very privileged to stand here today to talk to you all about it. Thank you very much.